Well, once again, operating under the assumption that somebody's listening, I always compare this to a moment of prayer, uh, you know, assuming y'all believe in that sort of thing. When we pray, and I've tried it in my life, put it that way, you're not sure who's listening. You're not sure if you're wasting your time or if there's going to be a big payoff. But we operate on faith. And in this particular case, this Sunday morning, I'm operating on faith that there are those of you out there listening, and I'm also grateful. Uh, Always grateful for uh, Command Central, whatever that might be. Maybe it's just the science of it all. Maybe it is God. But in this case, I'm grateful to my wife Margot, and she's back in the home base in St. Louis in my music studio, uh, kind of producing this event. We're doing it on the fly. This is the first of this sort that I've ever done. Um, Today I'm in southeast Georgia, very near where I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm at the farm at the Okefenokee. And I've been invited down here to help with the documentary. Uh, it's been a wonderful weekend. It's been a replenishing weekend for me. I love coming down here 4 times a year or so, um, just to remind myself of where my music came from, the feel of my music, where it came from, and just to it's kind of redeeming in a sense. And what I mean by that is that there's there's so much that still happens down here that harkens back to the old way of doing things. And what I'm finding out at the farm in the Okefenokee is that they honor tradition. This is a regenerative farm, and I'm not qualified to just accurately define that. Y'all can Google it. I don't like to talk about things that we can all Google uh, and so on. I want to honor our time together in a different way. But suffice it to say that the Native Americans understood the regenerative farm concept. And um, ironically, in the modern world, we're realizing, hey, a lot of the ways they did it in the way back when, uh, we might need to return to a little bit. Um, well, they're not going all the way back. I mean, for instance, the Chesser family who lived on Chesser's Island, probably as the hawk flies, maybe 3 miles from here, west, uh, they had to make their own soap from boiling animal fat, adding lye to it. It was a long process, and it was a bit dangerous. You're dealing with chemicals that, um, in a certain state, are very unhealthy for you. But you got to clean yourself up, and so those sorts of things we don't have to do so much in the modern world. Somebody has to do it, um, but what you can learn uh, about at the farm at the Okefenokee is that you can learn at the farm at the Okefenokee. And I've gotten a very brief but uh, invigorating education of just my weekend of being here. You're seeing crop rotation. You're seeing uh, animals being raised. Certain types of animals are being raised which work well with this environment. I remember being on tour in Spain about 10 years ago, and I noticed that the cattle in Spain reminded me of the cattle that I see between St. Augustine and, say, Hastings, Florida, in Northeast Florida, again, where I grew up. And I saw the same cattle here at the farm at the Okefenokee in Southeast Georgia. And they said, yes, indeed, they come from Spain. And the climate is similar. Uh, for the most part, so many parts of Spain reminded me of Florida. Possibly no surprise that the conquistadors came to this area or wanted to come to this area or found this area hospitable to them and stayed for a while. Anyway, I'm as I always do. I'm thinking about this Sunday morning. What the heck am I doing? What is my role in the big system? Now, there are farm animals grazing. There are hens and chickens and pens around here. There are pigs and geese and all of that. Are they thinking about their role in the big picture? I really doubt it. They're just doing what they do. And you learn by observing them how that kind of can work for our own selves. I mean, I know it sounds kind of corny, but being here at the farm is grounding to me in that way. The hens do what they do, the geese do what they do. I saw a mother goose just sitting beside the bank of a lake, and I thought, oh, poor thing. She looked all dirty. As a matter of fact, when I first saw her, I thought she was dead because she was so dirty, and all the other geese uh, in and around the lake were just very pretty white. And Jeff, one of the owners and the founder, the visionary of the farm, was taking me around. He says, "No, that goose is not dead at all. She's just maintaining her eggs. She's watching over those eggs, no matter what happens, no matter how many coyotes come around here. Um, she's 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 her job, her task is to mind those eggs." She was just sitting there, and I said, "Yes, I see a high fence, very high fence around this pond where the geese are." And I said, "Can the coyotes and the foxes still get to them?" And he goes, "Well, in theory they could, but we don't worry so much about the geese." "Why don't you worry about the geese?" I said. He said, the, the geese pretty much take care of themselves. They will gang up on a predator and make that predator wish it never came inside that pen. So the geese are very, very aggressive, and they'll let you know you're not welcome if you get too close to that nice pile of eggs that she's tending. But anyway, the goose there, our typical goose, does what it does. And as an artist, I learned long ago that I needed to do what I do, else I just won't feel like myself. So I come out to the farm at the Okefenokee and I feel grounded. And oddly enough, when I take a canoe trip, as I did yesterday down the 12-mile canal that leads to the belly of the swamp from the east entrance, I feel grounded even though I'm on water. I feel I feel like my process, my my artistic pursuit is worth doing. And I know every time I go down this road with y'all, whether or not I'm in concert, on the breaks, or after the shows, and I talk to people, and I don't know, it's just the right thing for me. Everybody says, yeah, of course, your mission is worthwhile. And one of the redeeming factors, if not the most redeeming aspect for me for being out in the swamp, is that I'm I, I I touch in with the swamp's relationship to time and productivity. There's an apparent stillness to the swamp that's very intimidating when you first get to it. There's like a cycle of reactions that you have to the swamp. Before you even get to the swamp, you're a little bit afraid. Even as many times as I've been out there, and I've camped out there, um, even when I was a boy, I got the opportunity to camp by myself, go away from the rest of the troop. It was part of the merit badge system, but the notion of that made me afraid. And then I went from being afraid to cautious. And once I got cautious, I be I lived in that caution for a while. You know, it's an awareness. It's an awareness of the omnipresent, dangerous possibilities, which is really caution, I guess. And it sort of at some point morphs into respect. And that's what the locals demonstrate in a real functional way, in an admirable way. They understand how the system all works together out here, the natural system. And they can live within it, amongst it, and they can live off of it. Their families have been living off the land from the bounty of hunting and farming for years. And I respect their relationship to the Okefenokee, and they have to respect nature in order to survive. I'm not a hunter. Some of that is, some of the hunting stories are hard for me to listen to, but that's just, you know, it's okay. I mean, I've just so much respect their, their very uh, intentional pace in dealing with their lives and in dealing with their relationship to nature. So, so you move from caution to respect, then you traverse into comfort, and that's where they all ultimately were. The the Jesser family, just to focus on one family, came to the Okefenokee Swamp in the 1850s. They were Scotch Irish, and maybe some of y'all can tell me what that really means. That sounds like that does sound like opposite descriptions, but please, please, y'all, that's a well-used term, Scotch Irish. But um, again, Google it and let me know what it is. I'm not going to waste y'all's time trying to act erudite about that. But um, the influence were Northern European in that sense, um, and for those for that 100 years that they lived in the swamp, they became comfortable with it. Now, I don't mean that they were always uh, comfortable physically. They were comfortable with the notion of being out there. As a matter of fact, I uh, shortly before, right before he passed, I was granted a little time with Mr. Bill Chesser, who grew up in the swamp, and he told me that when he was a boy, he couldn't wait to get out of the swamp. Said if he said when I left, I never wanted to live on top of wooden floors for the rest of my life again. And those of us in the city with our Dwell magazines and everything, we think of wooden floors as so exotic and almost as a symbol of success. You've got hardwood floors and you've made it. It's like having art on the walls, original art. And I said, well, why don't you like hardwood floors? He said, because the weather would come up through the cracks between them. And he said, y'all might not think of Florida winters as being uh, that brutal, Florida and Southeast Georgia winters, but there's something about the humidity in the air and the wetness when that combines with the cold. let me tell you, y'all, it bites in a way that those New York winters never bothered me. I'm always more uncomfortable down here in the brutal parts of the winter, which are very, very short. But every now and then you get a day that it's just, oh, geez, this is hard to endure. And imagine enduring that in a log cabin on Chester's Island, um, with no insulation. But the payoff is that for the rest of the year, got you've got that that summer cool that's underneath the house coming up through the house. They figured all this out, and they lived in concert with nature. So the swamp seems slow and it intimidates you at first, but there's so much going on constantly. And at the end of the day, there's that peacefulness and that tranquility, apparent tranquility. But there's that apparent slowness, but there's progress. The swamp is always changing. And so in that sense, it's redeeming to me. And I'm talking a lot this morning. I hope that's okay. Consider this like a Sunday morning sermon. I want those of you who are artists and creators, which most of you are, I believe that most people are. I believe that most people are writing the story of their lives. And it can be a very painful story. Yes, there are people who cannot change their situations easily. I am very well aware that there are people in bondage in situations that they are not happy with, that they cannot control. So I am not here as a successful artist in the United States of America with all of this wonderful bounty around me, claiming that everybody is satisfied with their scenarios. I am not. But many of us are writing the story of our lives. And that's why I beg to differ with people when they come up to me at my concerts on the breaks and after the concerts and say, well, I'm just not creative. I wish I was creative like you. I don't know about that. But anyway, let's take just a little bit of a break. I want to play a song for you. Let's kind of lighten the vibe up a little bit. This is one called Catfish that I recorded with Rob Curto. And Rob Curto is an accordion player, buddy of mine. When I tour with Swamp Cabbage at this point, Rob is going to be touring with us, and he's fantastic. We just collaborate so well together, and I can't wait to get back out on the road with Swamp Cabbage when my hand gets a little better. It's I'm going to take the dressing off of it this week in New York City and begin my therapy and start getting back into music. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. But right now, I want to play for you a song that
catfish going upstream, mouth of the butter, give her the cream. Caught that catfish by the snout, turn that catfish inside of my meal. Banjo sing, mommy, banjo sing. Come on. And tell you where to go, way to country, way below. When you get there, the folks ain't home and the girls out mad 'cause the hair ain't come my be. Banjo sing, mommy, banjo sing. Oh. up a rock and hit him on the chin. He said, by golly, don't do that again, mind me. Banjo sing. Mommy, banjo sing. Come on, banjo sing. 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 Oh.
Woo. Thank you, Margot, for playing that clip. When I was watching that, number one, I was proud of it. That's an old Okefenokee song that was played here um, by a man named Hamp Mizell, and Hamp passed away in the 40s, I believe, late 40s, maybe early 50s. But he was a big contributor to the preservation of life and the ways and uh, of the folks who lived in the Okefenokee Swamp. Check this book out. I don't know if you can see this. I've talked about this a lot. It's called the Okefenokee Album, and it was written by Francis Harper and compiled by a professor at Georgia Southern University named Delma Presley. And there's a lot in there about Hamp Mizell. But Hamp quoted from Mr. Harper. He said, "Catfish is popular in the swamp region." And he said, "If a man can't play catfish, he ain't no banjo picker." A peculiar word in the song is snout. So I, meaning Francis Harper, the man who took this dictation, I asked him what it meant, and he said, Hamp responded, smellers, but we call them snouts. The second and third standards were once heard in the Appalachian Mountain States, but the first and final ones are pure Okefenokee. Here's the first and final ones. See that catfish swim downstream, mouthful of butter, gill full of cream. Caught the catfish by the snout, and I throwed that catfish all about. Now I studied Buddhism a bit. I'm not an expert of it. I'm just not disavowing my Christian roots, and just leave it at that. I took of it what I could, and I learned of it what I could. But this resonates a little bit Buddhistically to me, because they're seeing that catfish in the stream and they're picturing it as being on their plate, mouthful of butter, gill. You can see that catfish swim downstream, mouthful of butter, gill full of cream. He does not have butter in his mouth when he's in that stream. The fisher man or woman is imagining that. So that's a little bit like the Buddhists who in seeing the piece of paper in this book imagines the sun and imagines the pine tree that was felled in order to make the pulp, in order to make the paper. So the last verse that was also purely Okefenokee was, Jaybird sitting on a hickory limb. He winked at me and I at him. Picked up a rock and it hit him on the shin. He said, by golly, don't you do that again. Now, I mean, does that happen? It doesn't matter. It's certainly a humorous image. Speaking of image, I'm thinking about this setting here, and I'm thinking about what we do as artists. I wish the United States had more appreciation coming down from the top, coming down from the government towards the arts. And that has changed from administration to administration, but the I'm worried about where we are going as a country, because I believe that the appreciation and the expression of the appreciation of American art is as darn patriotic as you can get. Um, we as artists, especially as American roots artists, are ambassadors of this country when we travel and to other countries and play American roots music. For better or for worse, when I play in Germany, for instance, people will come up to me and ask me about the current administration, and it's almost like they're asking me to answer for it. They're asking me to, they're holding me responsible. I am the ambassador of the United States for any president who's in office. But that's what we get for traveling to other countries and playing American roots music. Um, but that's as unfair of a burden on me as expecting a Venezuelan person to answer for Maduro or whatever. You get my point. But what we do as artists is, in my interpretation, what they're doing here at the farm of the Okefenokee. And in my time traveling through this whole uh, many hundreds of acres out here, I, I I I came to understand that the owner Jeff, eh, he's a bit of an artist himself, and he was a visionary. He dreamt of setting up a farm like this, a regenerative farm, for many years. I think he purchased this land in um, in 2005, maybe something like that, and here we are, 20 years later. Um, in a, Looking at functionality, looking at progress. Yeah, it took 20 years to make this happen, but this man did it. Um, he was uh, he grew up on an Iowa farm, and I don't know his whole story, but he moved down to southeast Georgia, and I think he moved to Jacksonville first, and then he kind of had his eye on this area. This was originally a turpentine farm. There's pine trees here. And on the edges of the farm at the Okefenokee, which is still part of the property here, remains the pine trees that were farmed for turpentine throughout the years. And I got to meet some of the people whose families work these farms in this area for years, and some of the families still do. So there are things out here. There's a lot going on at the farm of the Okefenokee. There's there's the regenerative farming aspect of it, and the agriculture and the livestock and so on. But there are also houses, and so I think part of it is a business venture. I'm not sure of all of that part. There You can come here and buy a lot, and the farm itself will build you a house. So there's that part of it. But what I never gathered from some of their marketing initially was that your house, one of which I'm sitting in right now, is perched right next to the agriculture, right next to the natural landscape, right next to the very slow and tranquil progress. And it it's pretty unique in that sense. I mean, what else would it be in this area of the country? It would be you'd be for a community of this nature. These are these are nice homes that you're building here. What else would it be? It would be golf courses, and that's as far as you can get from a regenerative concept. Um, so I'm perched right now next to olive trees. They stunt their growth just to keep them from suffering from the nor'easters that come through, and one of which we're getting ready to have, um, and the hurricanes and such. So they want them to survive. So they're kind of keeping them. They're governing their height. But what what they're doing here is responding to the environment. There were some trees that were not doing too well, and I asked Jeff about that. He said, we're probably going to replace those with something else," and they weren't thriving in this environment. And in much the same way, people uh, have to survive, or people have to find the right environment for themselves. You have to surround yourself with a working situation, if you possibly can, with people who get you. This land gets certain types of plants. It gets certain types of agriculture. And I know people who've taken jobs, and their bosses just don't sort of allow them to do their best work because their bosses see them as one particular type of thing. And eventually, those people, it takes a while. They either um, are find a way to express their strengths in the work environment, or they have to go somewhere else. And that's kind of what I did in moving from Northeast Florida to New York. I felt like I was I was doing okay there. I was making a lot of money when I was younger, playing private parties, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be appreciated for my original music. And so I moved from Jacksonville to New York. And when I got to New York, and New York is like living in the whole world, everybody's there. The Japanese people are there, the French people, the German people, the Australians, the people who fled there from Eastern Europe during the wars and that kind of thing. So everybody's there. And all those people just noticed my swampiness. I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't want people to know I was from the swampy areas. Now, I didn't grow up in the swamp. I'm using the swamp as kind of a word for this whole area. But the swamp, I didn't even know it at the time, but it was informing me. I was playing a soundtrack to this area. And the feel of what I did came from this area. I didn't understand how camping out in the Okefenokee, I didn't understand how that was informing my art. So what I realized was happening is that I was sharing with y'all. I was sharing with the world. I was sharing with people in Denmark, Germany, how the swamp made me feel. How can I possibly convey the swamp otherwise in my music? I can't tell you how it looks through my music. I can only tell you how it makes me feel. And that's the job of an artist, in my opinion. I'm completely bored by art that just that purports to be art, but is really just documenting art. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that a documentary film is unartistic, but when somebody shows me a painting of, let's say, the ocean, and it's pretty much as realistic of a depiction of the waves in the sky as what my eye can see. It's basically as if they painted what my eye can see. I'm bored by that. I know I'm being a little judgy here, but what I need to see in a work of art, be it painted, if it's a painting or if it's a photograph, is I want that artist to impart in his or her work how that setting made him or her feel. So that's what the Okefenokee does to and for me, is it reminds me of how I have to deliver my art to you all. Um, and I want to give an example right here of a painting that Vincent van Gogh made in 1889, and I think it's called The Olive Tree. And assuming that you can hear my voice, um, y'all just think about that for a second. And was the sky in southern France or wherever this came from, wherever this was based, was the sky really yellow at that point? Uh, did it appear to radiate in um, in in such directional lighting? Could you see the direction of the sky's rays? Could you see the direction of the soil? No, but that's the movement that the artist felt at that point. That's the heat. The yellow is the heat. And you can just sense that heat or the warmth. Or maybe it's just the brightness of the sky. But I've never seen a sky that looks like that. I don't think Vincent van Gogh ever went to Mars or something. But that's how it made him feel. And that's why I think we can consider this art. Margot, you could take me back to the olive field. Thank you. So these are olives. These are olive bushes or trees that this is how it's manifested in southeast Georgia, unlike the olive trees in Italy that are allowed to grow very, very tall. But I just love how one could wake up in the morning and just be amongst this. And most often you'll get a general southeast Georgia breeze like this. Um, but getting back to the video we just played, Catfish, I'm proud of that, and I, I was so happy that we recorded that in that spot. We did that video in a spot, and it was right outside of Philadelphia. I can't remember the river that it was, Schuylkill River or something like that. And oddly enough, I knew about the song Catfish because the professor who came down from Swarthmore College, which was right near where we recorded that video, Francis Harper, um, who came down to Folkston, Georgia, and the Okefenokee Swamp. Um, he came from that area, and so I, I kind of brought that music sort of full circle from the Okefenokee Swamp to where he came from, to that from where he began his journey to get to the Okefenokee. Can you imagine in 1921 taking the train all the way down to Waycross or Folkston? He had borrowed recording equipment from the Library of Congress in Washington, and it was rechargeable equipment. It had some sort of a battery supply that you had to actually plug it in. Now they didn't have uh, electrical outlets out there in the swamp, so he would have to charge his equipment up in Folkestone, and he only had about 15 or 20 minutes to record a battery life in order to operate his machinery. He recorded on what they called acetate. And for a year, I looked at that and I thought, what is acetate? There are things in life that you just assume come from a different time, and you just assume that, well, that can't possibly understand what that is. That's acetate. They were just mispronouncing it. It's acetate. And so these were done, uh, just recorded in a way that it's by a methodology that we don't use. It's a medium we no longer use. Old cylinders and directly to disc in that sense. But this was preserved in the Library of Congress by a man who came from a Philadelphia area college, came all the way down on borrowed equipment from the Library of Congress and recorded the people who were living in the Okefenokee Swamp, uh, a stone's throw from right where I sit. And so here I am in 100 years later, trying to give new life to this body of work. And as I sit on this Sunday morning, I'm proud of this project. I want to tell y'all something that I partook in a couple of nights ago. We had a fireside chat with some of the local men here at the farm at the Okefenokee, and these were local guys about my age, and some of them were a little younger. Um, and I was a bit reluctant to do this at first because I know how folks in um, non in more rural areas feel about the big outsider coming in. People, the body language was a little stiff as far as the way I was received initially. But I tried to meet everybody on. I was brought down here under the auspices of being the big researcher and the appreciator of the music that came from this area. But come to find out, the locals, they live off the land, and again, I say this with respect and an attempt to understand their ways of being. They don't relate to music in the same way that I do. Music is my life. Music is spirituality to me. These folks go to church on Sunday. I just have a show called Hymns and Hollers, and I sit with y'all every Sunday. And my church is just going out to the Okefenokee and letting the swamp invigorate me artistically. My church is playing the guitar. My church is being open enough to receive the maybe what's a divine flow and just coming up with songs or giving life to songs, blah, blah, blah. But music to those folks was more of a practicality. In fact, the hollers that I do weren't even thought of as music at all. They were practical communication. Um, the banjo music that is Appalachian in nature was played at frolics on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons. And on Sundays, it would be after a little church service, and people would get together. And it would be a way of just sort of marking the end of a week, essentially, and people just um, celebrating the one aspect of the easy part of living life out here amongst nature like that. In other words, it was like one of the payoffs. So I thought it was interesting that music would bring the different people together who lived on the different islands of the Okefenokee Swamp, and they used reels and jigs and that sort of music, like catfish, to come together. And music still brings people together now, and regardless of who we vote for in the modern day, great music, great grooves, great melodies goes straight from our hearts to the people who are listening, and it really just unites people. Um, so these guys who were from this locality sat with me around a fire, and we all exchanged stories. And my stories were always musical in nature, and you know And their stories were, what do you think were some of the finest moments of these guys' lives? I'll tell you, it was, with one exception, um, all of the guys told hunting stories. And and I just thought, well, that's very interesting. Hunting seems to me to be just practical. That's just like, if you, hunting to me, from not being a hunter, that sounds like, well, going to Home Depot and buying some wood and building something. That's like survival. That's a tool. But to them, hunting is recreation. It's fulfilling. It reminds them of their connection to nature. It reminds them of, I think it's a it's almost redeeming in the sense of it's just ultimate manliness to them. And I don't mean that in any disparaging way. It just means, everything means something to different people. And but to me, art is spirituality. When I play, if I were given the assignment of playing these trees, I could not possibly make music that sounded like these trees. What am I going to do? Make the sounds of wind going through the branches? No, I'm going to make the sounds. I'm going to try to convey the sounds of the way these trees make me feel. And these guys were conveying the way hunting made them feel. And there was, you know, they just enjoyed being out there in the woods and taking a beer, or I mean a bear, or they might have taken beers too, but taking a bear or taking a deer. And deep inside, I'm an animal lover, so deep inside I was going, oh gosh, can't you just let it live? And I tried not to be judgmental, and I certainly didn't voice any of my confoundment with their enjoyment. But that was part and parcel with the way folks survived out here. And I thought, well, ironically, and this is what I would tell them in my stories, y'all survived with hunting and living off the land. I have survived off the swamp in a different way. When Richie Havens retired, after me having played with him for 10 years, I had all my eggs in his basket, and I asked myself, what the heck am I going to do that's new and unique and can help me keep going in the musical community? And I called upon my time in the swamp, and I thought, if there were all these people out in the swamp um, harvesting timber, living off the land, there must have been some music made. And I'll be darned, certainly I found a little bit of it in the Library of Congress. And here's a piece called Idumea, and it was in the shape notebook, the 4-note book, as they used to call it. And this is my group's Swamp Cabbage's interpretation of it. This is a very early an attempt at this song. I play it differently now, but I generally play it in my Sunday morning um, gigs, which I'm going to be one of which I'm going to be doing at the Florida Folk Festival coming up the weekend before Memorial Day. So if y'all are down in Southeast Georgia or Florida at all, please try to come see me down by the riverside, the Swanee River, the Florida Folk Festival. But this is an electric version of Idumea, which was an old Civil War song called Am I Born to Die?
And am I born to die? To lay my body down, and must my trembling spirit fly into a world unknown?
Woo. Thank you once again, Margo, for holding down the fort in St. Louis in my studio. Um, I will be back next Sunday, and I will be doing all my broadcasts throughout April um, from my studio in St. Louis. I'm currently uh, recuperating from hand surgery, and y'all know this. I had an accident a while back, and we're um, over a series of operations. We're trying to get my hand back to top shape. Maybe it won't ever be. Maybe it'll just be what it is. But anyway, in April I'll be in physical therapy and not able to really play. That's why we're calling upon videos. Um, but I'm so proud of the songs that have come out of my Okefenokee research. And I'm really, really enjoying being here at the farm. I, um, I, you know, the thing about the swamp, there's always that fear you have, and that's not a part of what this experience is. You get the beauty of the swamp, the inspiration of it. You get the the setting of it without that fear. I mean, there's you hear coyotes at night, but there's high fences around all the animals, and there's Great Pyrenees dogs that are keeping watch over the place. And you know, you it's but it's different. This isn't um, a fishbowl per se. There's a phone call coming in. I got to. I'm assuming that I'm still on again. It's like prayer. You just assume somebody's listening. Um, but these remote um, broadcasts we do with a little bit of fingers crossed, and but we're getting it down. Anyway, I'll be broadcasting next week and all through April, every Sunday morning, uh, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, and just trying to present. I think more than ever, more than anything, I want to. I feel like I'm an ambassador for uh, American music, American roots music. And I also feel like I'm an ambassador for driving home the relationship between the artistic pursuit and the spiritual pursuit. And I think America is really missing an opportunity to embrace the arts, especially American roots music and or American roots arts. And because, well, I'll just tell you, I being here in Swamp reminds me of four aspects of art that I try to impart into the work that I do, especially in the instrumental music that I perform. And you've got music again, in any art. It could be a painting. The way I see it and the way I receive it and the way I try to make it and reproduce it has to have a roughness and an edge. That's like element number one. And these are not all in any kind of order of priority. But there's nature has a roughness to it. You know, you look at the pine trees and the bark is rough, and you look at the cypress knobs on the side of the swamp, and they're sticking up out of the water like this, and that's not that's not serenity. I mean, it might be slow and peaceful to look at it, but it's not a clean line, so to speak. And as you walk through the woods, as I did as a Boy Scout, and I would see old rusty machinery out in the woods, or pieces of narrow gauge railroad track, or the foundations of small buildings out in the middle of an island in the swamp. What the heck was that? You could say that's not nature, that was man made, but I'm getting to the point where I almost believe that almost everything man does is natural because we've used nature and this is what we came up with. Who's to say that's not natural? Uh, we do horrible things to each other. Who's to say that's not natural? I'm not saying that every horrible thing is a good thing. I'm not saying that everything in nature is good. Yeah, I don't need to go down that road. You get where I'm coming from. But so you've got roughness, you've got an edge, and then that's contrasted with smoothness. And in the swamp, you find smoothness on the top of the water. You know the what you stop rowing for a minute when nobody else is around, and you just drift, and then the the ripples start to recede. Your own ripples start to recede, and you just shut up and you listen to nature schooling you. And um, and if you're lucky enough to get there early enough in the morning, when the cool air is hitting that warm water, you get a little fog, and that's a smooth and soothing nature. And I impart both of those qualities into my music. So they're textures, they're textures and they're emotional qualities. But there's two more aspects of art that I try to impart. And I want to be clear here. I'm not just talking about music. I'm talking about even if I'm giving a speech at a university or something, or if a, a ballet dancer's choreographing a piece, or a photographer's capturing nature. The third aspect is the is threat, is imminent danger. It's like it's and so you're risking the swamp. We all know it when we're comfortably in our city apartments or wherever, and we think of the swamp, the first thing that comes to mind is, for most of us, is just danger. It's dangerous. Either it's gators, moccasins out there. Um, but again, you eventually get comfortable with that. You know it's there, but you have a respectful comfort and an acceptance of that. But isn't that like life in general? There's always risk. If you take no risk in life, there's I always find it people very curious to me that people who are just play it safe all their life. And do they ever think about if they take an airplane, how crazy that is? They're in a inside of a long coffee can going 600 miles an hour. Um, do they ever think in general? It's like, have they ever been out at night and looked at the stars and realized that we're just turning 1,000 miles an hour, and there's some degree of there's got to be some understanding of a omnipresent craziness, an omnipresent danger. But there's an there's an order to it all. There's a chaos. And maybe some of you are going, hey, stupid, that's God. That's the order to it. But whatever it is, I'm not so knowledgeable, and I'm not going to make the assumption that is God. Maybe God is just how this all fits together. And but that leads me to the fourth aspect of that I try to impart in my art, and I'm reminded of it when I come to the Okefenokee, and it's the most prevalent of all is randomness. Randomness, there's got to be something random about a work of art to me that really makes me think that it's actually real. And I'm I'm wondering about the challenge that we're all going to have about AI as we get deeper into that, because we're all going to be wondering what's real about this. And I'm so proud to say that the art that I make and the the inspiration I draw from the swamp in this area in North Florida and Southeast Georgia is real. I mean, I don't get to that from AI. You know, no computer program is making my music or interpreting nature for me. No computer program is telling you guys how I feel. I'm doing that. And that's me being loyal to the conduit of energy. But the randomness is all around in the swamp. You're rolling along and bloop, you hear this splatter. And you look off to the right and it's an alligator just devouring a small turtle. Or if it's a big turtle, then there's a big show to happen. It's not so good for the turtle, but the gator's happy. And you see that cycle of life. And or above, you might catch an eagle, or perhaps it's a buzzard, and you wonder if that buzzard's just waiting for you to succumb. And then there might be another splatter. Perhaps it's a bass going after a fly that just landed on the water's top. But there's randomness. And oh, you lose your balance slightly. You almost fell in the swamp. And that just happened because a gator came on the shore and he created a ripple and just threw you off balance. You're okay. But these are random. And then you see the clouds and they're changing by the minute. It's all, everything is happening so effectively. Change is happening. But if you just catch it in one glimpse, if you Polaroid this, it almost looks like it's happening slowly. But there's a lot that's happening. And over time, from the beginning of this broadcast to the end, that sky has changed. I guarantee it. Y'all can reverse it and look at it on YouTube at the end. And that's what the artistic process is to me. And that's why being in the swamp is redeeming. And that's what I've liked about my time at this farm at Okefenokee this weekend, because I'm reminded that a farm is a slow pace. It's tranquility, but it's progress. It's omnipresent progress happening all the time. And if you insist from our city ways that progress be immediate, that's a quality that we get used to being in New York, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Waycross, Savannah, even towns that are closer to here. You're at first a little restless when you come out here, and you quickly adapt. So randomness is a real essential aspect that certifies and really assures us that the art that we're making, the art that you're seeing and taking in is real. I want to say one more thing. In the fireside chat that I had with the locals, I got the opportunity to meet a man named Mr. Pete Mazel. And Pete was the great grandson of Hamp Mazel, who was a fiddler and a banjo player and a hollerer in the Okefenokee Swamp. He lived maybe about 20 miles north of here on the east side of the Okefenokee. and one of the prairies is named after him. He was a hunting guide, and was really a naturalist. But it was thrilling for me to have come from studying and researching the ways of some of the folks in the swamp to meeting their relatives. And it was also, it was an honor. And it was intimidating at first because I, but I quickly realized that even these folks who grew up in this area, they didn't know as much about some of the music and the roots of the music as I did. And so we kind of came together in a very interesting way. Once again, me enjoying the bounty of the music that was made in the swamp, them enjoying the bounty of industry from the swamp, be it from hunting or getting one man. I think his name was Joe Boy. He was a black man, and he sat next to me at the fireside chat. Wonderful guy, and he had worked this whole farm. He had worked on the turpentine farm that was once where I sit right now talking to y'all. And from job to job throughout his father's life, he would he would learn the different trades that his father did. He followed his father throughout all of his father's different trades throughout his father's life. And I thought, what a fascinating way to grow up. And but in this day and age of I found the locals to be refreshingly real. These guys were smart. Yeah, they were Southeast Georgia boys, but these guys were smart and they told great stories. I mean, in a certain way, I'll be honest with y'all, they showed me they handed me my bottom on a platter. They weren't trying to do it, but they were such good storytellers. Oh my gosh. And I think of myself as a good storyteller. And I'm told by a lot of y'all that I am. But and then it occurred to me that they've been doing this all their lives. This is how they grew up. Front porch storytelling and just passing these tales down from generation to generation is something they're very, very used to, very comfortable with. I admire it. I found these being around these guys too. Um, they reminded me of my roots. So, I mean, I have my family ran farms in South Carolina and one side of the family, and that was my father's side. My mother's side of the family ran a farm in Perry, Florida. So I come from this, even though I don't. When I was younger, if you asked me, are you connected to farm life and agriculture? I would say, hell no. And how wrong would I have been? So it reminded me, it just talking with the locals and being out here in the swamp is always redeeming for me. It reminds me of my roots. And when I started singing these hollers after Richie Havens retired, I started playing this banjo music, translating it to guitar, and playing these old gospels and spirituals. I realized I could do this easily. And anything in life that comes to you easily, especially if other people take enjoyment at it, that's a gift from God. Okay, maybe God doesn't exist, but it's a gift from all of this. And you got to seize that. You're a fool if you don't use that blessing. On a Sunday morning, um, I think my time with y'all throughout the end of April is going to be about recognizing blessings and returning thanks. I happen to do that through art. Um, my talent is a blessing to me. I try not to squander it. And I'm going to leave you with a song called Steal Away. And I love this version of the song. I haven't listened to it in a couple of years. I made it with Stephen Williams and Andre Murchison on trombone. And I'm playing guitar, electric guitar. And y'all, there's no bass on it. There's no electric bass. Oh my gosh, how can you make a song without a bass? I'm doing this front porch style. the drummer is representing the stomp, the horn player is kind of representing the call and response. Maybe the horn player's playing the role of a fiddle. My guitar is playing the role of a banjo. And I love translating Southern roots music to an electric or jazz format. This was recorded in all places at Atomic Sound in Brooklyn, Red Hook, Brooklyn. But these are all the guys from the South, Baltimore, sort of South. Stephen Williams is from Baltimore. My good friend Andre Murchison on trombone is from Savannah, Georgia, right up the road a piece from here. And I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. This is Walter Parks. I'm going to close with this. This is Hymns and Hollers. I'll see you every Sunday morning. Bye-bye. Here we go. I love this one.
I'm gonna steal away to Jesus.